Coach Lane Kiffin, welcome to Sports Spectrum, sir. How you doing?
Awesome. Thanks for having me, Jason.
Absolutely. Great to talk to you. Thanks for doing this. Let's start with the NFL draft. It's upon us here, basically, as we release this interview. And I thought it would be a great place to start and just ask you about that gratification that you must feel as a coach when you see a player that you've been, through the ringer with and coached through many years and many seasons with get drafted and have that opportunity to play pro ball. How gratifying that is that for you?
It's awesome because they put so much work into it, and it's such a big deal for them. And so many of them, it's their number one dream, their childhood dream, and to finally get to that moment is really cool just to be part of and see that.
Yeah, you obviously coach to win games. That's your job as a coach. But talk about, as a coach, seeing those wins off the field and what they mean to you when you see a guy go on and not just have success in the NFL, because that's kind of on the field as well, but really just succeeding in life after football.
Yeah, I think that, well, I know that has kind of changed over the years with me. For whatever reason, I think that, so much was driven early on about job as a coach was to get the player drafted that, the best college career and drafted the highest that they can. And, now, especially as you kind of get older and you see how many guys, okay, they get that dream, they go to the NFL, and then what, and so many of them calling, looking for jobs that were even high draft picks and already out of their money years later and stuff. So now it's turned a lot more to really enjoying seeing them do well off the field.
What was it that kind of ignited that shift for you in that mindset?
I'm not sure. Maybe I kind of look towards the FAU experience of, the first time not being at a, top 20 type program where all the 4 or 5-star recruits, everybody thought they were going to the NFL. And so I think going there and just seeing so many kids that were in the moment and, so passionate just about their team and winning versus, getting to the NFL, and so many of them working jobs on the side and, kind of experiencing real life instead of, 5-star life, at the major programs.
Lane Kiffin is our guest here on Sports Spectrum. Did you always know you want to coach? I mean, you followed obviously in your dad's footsteps and being around a coach for so many years, but when did you start to realize that coaching was going to be something that you were going to do?
I always knew that. I never thought of really anything different. I just was always, I think when I was young and my buddies, I was into watching great players, but, I was already kind of like watching great coaches on the sidelines, and it just always was kind of crazy to me to see someone not in a uniform standing there could make decisions based off of whether that team and that have the outcome of that, whether a team wins or loses, off of one decision here or there. Was pretty neat to me.
You must have moved a lot, I would imagine, as a kid, just being the son of a coach. What was that like for you, kind of adjusting to that? Was that just normal and kind of par for the course, or was that something that you kind of, had to, I don't know, get used to, if you will, because it was being at a different place, not all the time, but certainly a couple different places?
Yeah, there's good and bad to everything. Like I tell our team or players, no matter what it is, whether it seems good or bad, there's both sides to it. So, the moving thing is rough when you're young and doing that. But the good side is, you got to learn to make new friends, different parts of the country. And I think years later that helps in, recruiting, because you got to go into different areas and deal with different people. And, so I think that was tough, but very beneficial because I know a lot of my buddies that, never moved, same place, never really branched out.
Let's intersect the conversation with faith. That's what we do here at Sports Spectrum. I know your faith's important to you. Tell us about that. Tell us about the importance of that relationship that you have with the Lord.
I think it was, one that I was, always made to go to church when I was younger. And then probably like a lot of people kind of strayed away from that, especially when ego got involved and success and fame, where you start to really truly believe you're doing it all yourself, and everybody's telling you how great you are. we actually had a speaker here, Ryan Holiday, yesterday, who wrote Ego's the Enemy. So that's fresh in my mind about ego and how that can just
Yeah.
consume you like an addiction. And so I think kind of like the FAU thing with players, kind of the humbling of the firing, at USC, and then, the long road back to becoming a head coach and stuff. Sometimes you do some searching and, you get humbled a little bit, and uh, kind of found my way back there. And, just really helps me when I'm, in moments of where you're so worried about what everybody's thinking, your wins, your loss, all this. And, when I can remind myself, okay, that's really what I'm defined by, is how am I being as a kid to the Lord, as his son. That I'm not great at it, but when I do that, that puts things in perspective for me a lot.
You use that word ego. I heard somebody once say ego is easing God out. Can you kind of describe where you were when you were in that midst of that ego kind of taking over? Because you had so much success, if you will, or a lot of great opportunities at such a young age. Can you kind of walk through? I think a lot of people have the similar story in the sense of they start having some success and achievement and they start thinking that they're the reason. And that, especially if they had a foundation of faith, sometimes I call it the slow drift. Sometimes you kind of slowly drift away from God and your ego gets in the way.
Yeah, easing God out, like you just said, that's really good. That's exactly what can happen. Because you really do start to believe how great you are, and I just had this conversation with the speaker yesterday, Ryan, who wrote that book. And I was like, not only when you have success is ego an issue everywhere, but when you're public success in your job, because it's, you're on TV all the time. So then everywhere you go, people are telling you how great you are. When you're doing well, you start to believe that you are and that you got everything nailed, and that you're the one doing all of it. And, you know, too often we sit when bad things happen and say, oh, we'll give it to the Lord, go pray and give it away. And so, your mistakes and stuff. And just recently someone reminded me of, okay, well, you got to do the same thing with the good things. When good things happen, you got to give them back to him and give them away to him, because he's responsible for them. And that's not near as normal to do. But that if you do that, that protects from the ego coming in that you're the one doing all of it.
Was there a moment for you during this whole sort of, I don't want to say newfound faith, but reconnecting with God? Was there a moment where you thought, okay, God's winking at me here pretty strongly to maybe, reconnect with him? Was there a moment for you that you can recall?
I've been fortunate to kind of have a lot of those. And just strange ones. John Gordon, who I had never met, drove from Jacksonville to Boca and said God was telling him to come meet with me. We met like for hours and hours.
Wow. Yeah.
You know, uh,
I know John well. He's a good
Warren
friend.
sent me a book, Purpose Driven Life.
Mm.
And, highlighted at the front of it, the first words are, "It's not about you." And I was like, you don't have to read the rest of the book when I tell people, like, there it is right there. If you can figure that out, you're going to be a lot happier in life. Because then that guards you from the ego problem. So I've just been fortunate to have a lot of kind of, I guess, wake up calls.
We had on your director of character development, Sammy Smith, a few months ago. What a story he has, by the way. I'm sure you've talked to him about that. But he's obviously serving with you guys at Ole Miss. What is his involvement and how has he been in terms of impacting you and helping you grow?
Sammy's great. I always think, it's so much easier to listen to people that have gone through rough things. Especially for our players too, that can relate to. And so, his story and, what he's overcome. And then too, how these things happen, like I said, bad and good. I keep saying that in our program, like everything that's bad is good and everything that's good is bad. You just can't see it at the time. And as horrible as going to prison, everything was, I'm sure he would tell you now it was a great thing that happened to him. And most people can't understand how that could be, a great thing to go to prison, but because he's able to connect differently now and impact people differently had he just had an easy life.
Hmm. What's discipleship look like with you and him, and maybe anybody else who's pouring into you? Is there, studies that you do with scriptures? Is there just time when you're fellowshipping with other believers? What does that look like for you?
Yeah, we have Bible study on Wednesday morning, 7:15, and so um, I like it too because you're not the head coach. It's the
Yeah.
only thing around here where I'm not running it, like and listening. So that's refreshing for me, and you just get to be like everybody else there, and someone else is running it. So I really look forward to that time. Sammy does a great job.
Do you, I have to imagine when you came to this program, and obviously you get this very cool opportunity at the end of 2019, and then the pandemic hits and everything's kind of crazy and torn and thrown upside down. And I know it was maybe a little different in the South, but what was that like for you? Just coming to a new program and then having the world turned upside down and trying to adjust to all that was going on.
Yeah, that was unique. We couldn't recruit, we couldn't go on the road, then we weren't going to play. Then, it was just anytime, there's a lot of anxiety when there's a fear of the unknown and when you can't control it. And, we had no control of anything and being new, not knowing our players and practice time and everything. It was very challenging and strange.
And then playing, I mean, you had some fans, but there was a lot of places that, and especially in the SEC, that had some fans, but there's still 20% capacity, 30% capacity. Everything was kind of thrown upside down. That must have been so fascinating. Yet you still were able to win some games and play in a bowl game. But what's the lesson that you learned from that year? When you think about it as a coach, it had to be the most unique year as a coach you've ever experienced in some ways.
Yeah. There's a lot of things you take from it. I remind our guys, it shows you, I always say, just don't do things the way they've been done before because they were, really look at things analytically, challenge why we do things. And, that was an example to me, coaches are obsessed that you need to practice so much and be in pads so long, or you can't be ready to play and all that. And to me, that showed again, you don't have to do the old school way, and practice 3 hours in pads every day and all that stuff, because that was an example of some guys played really well with very limited practice.
Yeah. A couple more questions here with Lane Kiffin on Sports Spectrum. I've heard a few coaches who've been on this show talk about, how they see their job as a coach as an opportunity to use their platform in a positive way, right? And you have a platform. I see you on Twitter, and I love your engagement on there and opportunities to share. And you have a public, you're a public position, a public job, a public role. Do you see that the same way, that this is in some ways a platform that you have been given by God to steward well?
I do, and I've screwed that up. I remember at USC, our team chaplain or FCA, Michael Sylvester, and he said, "You're not using your platform," and I really didn't understand what he meant at the time. And he can take it away from you too. Much ego involved to listen to him at the time, and he also said, which I tell these players now too, when you're defined by your job, and that's really the number one thing, you're going to have problems, because that's going to come and go. That's going to be taken away. And now that I look back, I see that. And I also see that in coaches back then that were very balanced and had a great relationship with the Lord. I remember one specific on our staff, and I was always like, God, it doesn't seem like the world's over when we lose. And another coach were always like, we lost a game, it was like the world was over, because we're just so defined by our job. And sure enough, when you get fired, then you think the world is over because you are defined by your job. So then you got fired. So what do you have left? You have family, but I'm saying, as far as what is your purpose, and so I do now look at it totally different about the platform and utilizing that platform uh, instead of just instead of just making them the best player that they can be to make the most money on draft, which is exactly what I used to say in recruiting. When you come here, I'm not here to be your dad. I'm not here to do all these other things with you. I'm here to get you to play the best and make the most money on draft day. And a lot of players were like, okay, where do I sign up? You know, because that's all they cared about.
You mentioned the word purpose. What is your purpose now as a coach?
To help these guys to really use my mistakes, things that have happened to me. And that's what keeps, I kind of like, I'm at the age now where I feel like there's a window you go through right now. These kids, you're old enough to where you've experienced it, or coaches where you've gone through having kids and you've gone through things and a divorce and different things that you're able to now, nothing to do with football, really help them in these different situations.
So my last question, it's a question we ask all of our guests, and we really did appreciate your time here, Coach Kiffin. What's the Lord teaching you right now? What's God showing you? You mentioned ego just yesterday and hearing about that, but what's the great lesson that the Lord is either teaching you today or has been teaching you over the last few months to the last year?
Patience, slow down, and really what matters. And I'm not great at this by any means. I have to literally work on this almost every day because I get very upset, very frustrated by certain things. And I have to go, okay, that doesn't really matter. I kind of have to do the deathbed thing to me. Okay, you're on your deathbed. Is it really going to matter? And especially, we spend so much time on stuff that doesn't matter, arguing over what? Again, back to ego, because we want to win an argument that really doesn't matter.
Coach Lane Kiffin, thank you. Thanks for being here on Sports Spectrum. I really appreciate you. All the best to you, continued success, and hopefully we'll talk to you again sometime. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Jason. Have a good week.
You too.